Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the regular meeting of council to order. Our clerk today will be Ms. Sheila Gurry. I ask for a procedural motion to proceed in camera. Moved Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Hemmons. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome all of you to the March 6th regular meeting of council. I'd like to first recognize that we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Our clerk tonight is Ms. Sheila Gurry. Tonight's regular meeting of council will be held in accordance with the Community Charter and Council Procedure Bylaw 2018, number 7272. The question period sign-up sheet is on the table by the double doors to my left for agenda items only. If during the meeting any member of the gallery has a question regarding an agenda item, please write down your name and the agenda item on the sheet. Members have been granted the authority to join meetings electronically, and I welcome Councillor Manley, who's with us tonight electronically. First on the agenda is the introduction of late items, Ms. Gurry, and we do have one.
Yes, thank you, Worship. For agenda item 8A, we're adding the presentation, the actual PowerPoint for VIU's strategic plan and university activity. And that's it, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. Motion for adoption of the agenda is amended. Moved Councillor Hemmons, seconded Councillor Armstrong. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. We have no minutes to adopt. Mayor's report. I will be fairly brief tonight. The cost of growth is sometimes discovered in our streets, and that means that things have to be repaired and replaced. And so I want to remind everyone that the City of Nanaimo's Midtown Gateway Project and the Midtown Water Supply Project, which is a very substantial undertaking, will be teaming up to install critical underground infrastructure across Bowen Road and into Beban Park in March. This approach is efficient, but it will restrict access and delay traffic. From March 1st to 31st, the southern Bowen Road access to Beban Park will be closed all day and night to all vehicle traffic, cyclists, and pedestrians. All other park access points are open and accessible. And from March the 11th to the 26th, there will be alternating lane closures on Bowen Road 24 hours a day. One vehicle lane per direction will be available. However, drivers are encouraged to use an alternate route if possible to avoid delays. Rosstown Road at the intersection of Bowen will be closed to vehicle access 24 hours a day. Drivers are also asked to detour around using Pheasant Terrace and Labio Road. There will also be no transit service along Rosstown Road or Pheasant Terrace during this time. Construction work will typically take place Mondays through Fridays from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. However, it will expand to 24 hours a day, as I said earlier, from March 11th to March 26th in order to complete the works. And who says there isn't such a thing as Santa Claus? On Friday, as many people will already know, the province announced its BC Building Stronger Communities with $1 billion Growing Communities Fund. That will provide a one-time total of $1 billion to all 188 of BC's municipalities and regional districts to address their communities' unique infrastructure and amenities demands, such as recreation facilities, parks, and water treatment plants, as well as other community infrastructure. It will help communities prepare for future growth and build the amenities needed to support new home construction, especially with the Housing Supply Act, where targets are being set. And I'm happy to re-announce, if you will, the provincial government's good news for us. The City of Nanaimo has received will receive $16.1 million, and the Regional District of Nanaimo will get another $7.9 million, which by my calculation, if my math is still correct at my aged age, is $24 million coming into the Central Island, which is very good news for everyone. Nothing else to report. Next item is the Rise and Report section, Ms. Gurry, and we can announce that Brian Anderson was appointed to serve on the Board of Variance for a 3-year term ending February 27th, 2026, or until a successor is appointed. Congratulations to Mr. Anderson for stepping forward, as did a number of other applicants. It's important work that the Board of Variance undertakes, another volunteer position working for the citizens of Nanaimo. We're now on to presentations, and I am delighted. VIU's strategic plan and university activity, and we have no less a distinguished person than Dr. Deborah Saucier, President and Vice Chancellor of Van Cortlandt University. Good evening and welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just going to, it's a little echoey, so maybe I won't project as loudly. I'll just get my notes together. Here we go. Pardon me. And welcome Paul online, as well as Legislative Services, who looks like me. So at any rate, thank you so much for having me here tonight. Before I begin, I will use my rudimentary Hulkaminum, which is being taught to me by Uncle Gary Manson of Stoneimuk. Asiam nasieya, enthapet sepiko bihesku isku, Deb Saucier in English. Enthamana Ath, Henri Saucier and Marilyn Taranich. Tanitsan Ath, Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. Although I am a member of the Métis Nation of Alberta, via Batoche, well, a small town out of Batoche, Saint Laurent, and then the Red River before that, and Fort Chippewa before that. I'm really delighted to be here today to speak to you and use the lands of the Snuneymuxw First Nation, but also to welcome and thank each of you distinguished folks here today, and thank you as well for your kind attention. This is my first appointment of presentation to you folks since I was appointed 4 years ago. A little pandemic interrupted that planning for a long time, as did many other things I'm sure that you meant to be doing as well. Nonetheless, I've been working hard with the city all this time, and most recently on the Mayor's Task Force on Recovery and Resilience. And I look forward to helping make the community stronger and more vibrant as you all see fit as well. We are a university that is built for and by the community, and partnerships like the one we have with the City of Nanaimo is woven into the fabric of absolutely everything we do. We collaborate with our community partners to address the social, economic, and environmental challenges of our region. I like to say that we're more than educational capital. We are the social capital that helps make everything better in this city, along with, of course, the hardworking efforts of folks like yourselves and our colleagues behind us. But really what we're here to do is support our learners so that they can contribute to building and sustaining healthy communities that have vibrant enterprise, vibrant social capital, and that help meet the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. This is the key for future generations, healthy communities that raise healthy children who go on to raise healthy children. That is our legacy. So where are we today? Well, we're the second largest university on the island. And if you think that's because we're in a race of two, that's not so. We're actually the second largest post-secondary on the island as well. And although we're smaller than the largest universities in the province, I would like to say that that's neither something to be ashamed of nor something we want to change that badly. I think what we do and the size that we are sets us apart, and the kinds of experiences we can give students and that we can support so we can give our communities. We allow class sizes to be such that faculty know their students. They know when they're not there, which could have been helpful when I was an undergrad. But they also know that they where to stop and ask the question to say, I don't think you quite got that. And that's absolutely key to who we teach. We are an access institution, and I always say we should get a t-shirt, and Richard, we should get a t-shirt. Access isn't a dirty word. We define excellence by those we include and how they succeed, not by who we exclude. Think about it. The best universities in the world don't want you. You're not good enough for them. They're exclusive, and that's what exclusive means. We're inclusive. We believe that in the 21st century, post-secondary education is key to having a good life and to including everyone in the success that is the part of the 21st century. And so our relationships with the Indigenous nations on Vancouver Island and the coast means that 12% of our population is Indigenous. 12% of our population are international students as well. And we have large and passionate alumni around the globe who have come here over the years that we have been in existence. And we've been in existence in one form or another since the 40s. So we're not new either. Means that they're around the globe too. And with the help of my team, some of whom are here today, we are reaching out to those alumni and having them understand that if you went to Malaspina, or you went to the University College, or you went to VIU, you're all part of the foundation that is going to make us great moving into the future. I'm supposed to move this forward, I think. There we go. Thanks to whoever did that for me. You know, we have a number of faculties, and you can see them on the screen in front of you. And they really reflect the sense of place here on Vancouver Island and in the coastal areas. They reflect our proximity to the ocean and to the forest, including things like our fisheries and aquaculture programs, our Deep Bay Marine Station, to name some things, our Center for Seafood Innovation, the World Leisure Center of Excellence, our Office of Indigenous Education, tourism, hospitality. But we also have notable programs in education and health sciences, business management. If you have an accountant, we probably trained them. Art, design, and the performing arts. We are all so terribly proud of the work that those folks do. In research, we are coming into our own. We have strong and notable programs, including 4 Canada Research Chairs, 2 BC Regional Innovation Chairs, and 2 Michael Smith Health Research British Columbia Awards. And we are the only university outside of the research universities that have the Michael Smith Awards. In fact, not even all of the research universities have them. And that's because of our commitment to excellence in applied research, research that makes a difference to the communities where we learn. And what's more important than health research these days, right? And so we've been acknowledged as being leaders. And in fact, I've challenged our Assistant Vice President Research to double our research funding in the next 5 years. And I believe we can do it. Last year, we received nearly $2 million in funding from research grants and contracts, and so to double it would mean that we are on par with some of the research universities in this province. Our research areas range from biodiversity to social justice and cultural and creative research. But some of the reasons our students pick us is because of our hands-on experiences that we provide. One of the things that being smaller lets you do, and being focused on the student lets you do, is that you can get the student into work-integrated learning experiences faster and more often. And when you look at what people are looking for in employees and in careers, they want careers that are meaningful and give them things that they want to do. And there is nothing sadder than meeting somebody in their 3rd or 4th year saying, I know I was supposed to be X, but I actually don't like talking to people. Or I've had students in my office when I was at another institution who wanted to be a teacher, and they're like, I don't like children. And I'm like, that's a little bit of a problem, right? So by doing that from the 1st year or 2nd year, you get an idea before it's too late and too expensive to change your path about where your talents actually lie. And that's what makes the difference about who we are. Not only does this help our students learn where they want to be, but it helps our communities. During the first tranche of the pandemic, working with MyTax, we were able to use our MBA students and money that we provided, as well as money from small and medium-sized enterprises here in Nanaimo, to provide internships for our master's students and provide that kind of help about how to reskill your business in the light of everything all of a sudden being online, right? How we were able to help the community overcome that problem. We also, though, look into research in addiction, into treatment options for cancer. One of our research chairs that I'm particularly thrilled with, because he's a former student of mine, is looking how concussions affect women fleeing domestic abuse. All stuff that happens in our communities, all stuff that needs answers, all things that our talented faculty and students are studying at VIU. So as we look to the community that we serve, we work and live here, and we represent ourselves on a number of initiatives of importance to Nanaimo, including being represented on the Nanaimo Prosperity Corporation, in the Greater Nanaimo Chamber of Commerce, and on VIEA, the Vancouver Island Economic Alliance. We are very, very committed to our Indigenous partnerships, and we believe that everybody should feel welcome on all of our campuses. We have elders who are faculty on our staff, the same as other faculty are. And why do we do that? Because we believe that we should not privilege Western knowledge above all else, that we need to understand and respect other knowledges, and in doing so, show that respect by giving the same title and same responsibilities to elders who obviously are experts in their fields. They provide support and counseling not only to students and faculty, but to me, myself as well, as we try to make the decisions that will make VIU a better institution. We also are very committed, though, to our student experience, and we hope to help folks have a more balanced life. One of the things that was not particularly good when I went to university was this idea of work-life balance. It's sort of how you wind up a president. You don't really do that well. But what we'd like to do is actually have a healthier group of people moving forward, and in doing so, encourage them to be part of cultural, athletic, and student events that provide them with not only book smarts, but people smarts. I welcome everyone to come out this weekend as our women's volleyball team looks to land a record-setting fifth national championship. I had the privilege of touring our previous minister through the gym, a long-standing topic of myself in the city, Jake. I can tell you that she said, "What are all those pennants?" And I said, "Those are our teams and how much we win." And she goes, "Does that draw students here?" And I said, "Absolutely. And we're going to do it again, I hope. Otherwise, I'm going to have to wear somebody else's jersey." Nonetheless, our students take part in other leadership activities as well, and we have a large number of multicultural and intercultural programs like VIU World Days, not to mention activities that we invite the community in for, including the annual Ideas Lecture with CBC, where we explore topics of Indigenous interest. In our services, because we are an access institution, we are fully committed to supporting equity, diversity, human rights, and justice. We have volunteer tutors. As I said, we have work-integrated learning experiences. We have counseling services and a student health clinic. When speaking with the Minister of Mental Health a couple of weeks ago, the federal minister, that is, I suggested to her that she might want to help us out a little because, in fact, these days, universities are healthcare providers. Our students expect it, and our students need it, and so we do it. So maybe we can figure out how to get those there. But that being said, the one thing I've learned, and this was one of the things I was the most afraid of, was that the experiences of 2020 and 2021 were going to break our students. And I can tell you, our students are resilient. They are fantastic. They're a little more worried than they were probably in 2019. They're a little maybe more delicate than they might have been, but if thinking about the things that they've missed and the things they've gone through, our services are there to support them, and are they ever excelling? They are doing such a great job. And, of course, I would be remiss, because I was speaking with some of you at the break, we also have a world-class culinary and pastry arts students, as well as the Discovery Room, which I invite you to come and join me at another time. Everyone is welcome to that. It is not closed. Members of the public are there, and in fact, I had to meet the mayor at a different place because even I couldn't get a reservation. So with that, but do book ahead. But again, well worth your time. Is pretty fantastic. We also have a large number of global partnerships, and much of my work over the last 3 months has been going out and re-meeting our partners because, of course, 3 years is a long time to not go and see folks. And we have some examples I'd share with you, including developing tourism and hospitality programming to help enable increased access to managerial positions in Tanzania's tourist industry, developing and implementing national promotion campaigns for technical training programs in Mexico, Chile, Peru, and Colombia, as well as programs that we're working on with new partners in New Zealand, Australia, Vietnam, and Japan. So what does that have to do with the strategic plan? I listen, I don't talk. I used to talk, but now I listen. My voice goes after a while. Our strategic plan is very simple. It has 3 simple components and 2 commitments within each. And it focuses on the 3 things that I think make us different, because frankly, all primarily undergraduate universities are the same in Canada. Canada has decided to democratically invest in universities across the country. So what is it that makes VIU special? Well, it's our people, it's where we are, and it's how we let the people who come from this place realize their potential. I used to say, and some of you have heard me say, that I believe education is transformational. I was questioned and challenged by that by a number of people in the consultation phase, which involved more than 2,000 people, even though it was during pandemic and largely online, to actually think about the fact that transformation is something I do to you. But when you realize your potential, that's something you did with yourself. And so, although it's a nice alliteration, potential is actually what I believe more clearly reflects what we do at VIU. And so for people, our 2 commitments are pretty straightforward. We need to welcome a larger and more diverse population of learners. We need to become larger because, to be frank, it's very hard to scale some of the wraparound supports we have if we're too small. Everybody has to have a registrar, whether you have 40,000 students or 7,000. So again, the scalability is to become a little bit larger, but more diverse. We need to look more like the communities we represent, right? And not just a select subset of folks who maybe occupy a middle ground in income or socioeconomic status. But really importantly to me, and part of what I just mentioned to you, is that we need to become a more inclusive and healthier place for work and study. Strangely, if you put a whole bunch of type A people in a room, they start to compete with each other. And then they demand that their students compete with each other. And then those students compete with each other because that's what they've been taught to do. And then we go, why is it that everybody is sick? We need to become healthier and inclusive of people who have children who go to school. Many of us do. To become healthier so that if you need to take a break, you don't feel bad about having to do that. To actually encourage people to do this, take their vacation instead of working through it. Because we can model this kind of behavior, and in doing so, attract the new generation of learners, none of whom want the rat race anymore, at least not if you read the literature I'm reading. We also, though, need to grow to be the region's hub for research and expertise, and you've heard my plans for that one. And I say research, and that's not to exclude scholarly or creative practice, but because research has a very specific meaning that often is not applied to primarily undergraduate institutions. And so I use that as a little bit of a provocation to say that actually we're doing that too, not just the kind of scholarly or creative activity that some folks might want to pigeonhole us into. And we need to continue to build on the strengths of this institution and build stronger partnerships with Indigenous communities. And doing so, co-create what a university that is decolonized could look like. And last but far from least, potential. We need to become a leader in learning for new generations. I go to lots and lots and lots of meetings where people are like, if only we knew how to teach first-generation students. If only we knew how to teach students who were leaving foster care. If only we knew, and I'm like, I know. But we're modest. We hide our light under a bushel. I need folks at VIU to start saying, actually, we do know how to do this, and in doing so, lead. Because we don't have to reinvent wheels every time somebody comes up with the next new thing. And in doing that, we will become able to expand life-enriching and career-building experiences. Because the one thing people also need is experience, to know how to do the job and be job-ready when they get there. So I've talked about this, and I just want to finish up with a couple last bits, which are including our investments in students. We've received funding, and we are currently in the planning stages, and we hope to break ground on the expansion for Skapta, which will allow our elders to have more spaces to help serve our community and have a ritual gathering space so that we can have ceremony inside, not under those nasty tents that seem to blow away in the inevitable rainstorm that happens during our feast every year so far. Yeah, it's like 20 days with no rain, and then bang, on September 19th, there it is. The other thing, though, is that we've also announced, and thanks to the folks who were able to come from council for that, and to Jake as well, who was able to attend, we received funding to expand our student housing, which will, in effect, double it, and hopefully do something to relieve some of the housing pressures that you folks have to deal with, as well as myself. This will add 50% more beds, and it add a new cafeteria to campus as well. In short, we have a lot of great things happening. I'm sorry you haven't seen me in a while, but I'm always interested in chatting with you and in partnerships, collaboration, and I look forward to our continued partnership with the City of Nanaimo. Haitziapkasiyam.
Thank you very much, President Saucier. Do we have some questions from anyone? I have to offer Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank you very much for the presentation. And when you talked about being leaders, you know, we hear quite often when we travel just what leaders you are, especially when it comes to those in the foster system. The programs that you have there to enable those kids to get into university are amazing. So thank you for your continued work on that, and I know you're going to grow even bigger. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And
Paul has a question.
Councillor Manley.
Well, thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Dr. Saucier, for the presentation. It was great to see you here at Council, and I've always been really proud of being a VIU alumni. Like the programs that we have for youth out of care, the pilot programs that have become you know, regular running programs in other universities is something to be proud of here in Nanaimo. I'm curious about when the housing development, the new housing development's expected to be built. As you know, it's a real crunch. And it's a crunch for students here as well. So,
yeah, well, and thank you, Paul, or Councillor Manley. I'm sorry. I apologize. Your Worship as well. I'm used to chairing the meeting too. On top of it all, I'm like, I think Paul has a question. I'm so sorry. My apologies for lack of decorum. We anticipate the soft opening of the residence to be in 2025. With potentially 2026 as the actual opening. We have the RFPs out right now for the architect and the program manager. So we're looking forward to those wrapping up. And then if I can speed it up, I will. Because let me tell you, if you get questions about housing, I get questions about housing. And everybody seems to believe I have a secret stash of apartments somewhere on campus. But again, it's going to be at least 2 years out because, again, it's mass timber. And the main floor includes a cafeteria, study spaces, and other activity spaces so that people can truly be integrated into the facility. Will that be, Your Worship, the first mass timber in Nanaimo?
Say that again.
Will that be the first mass timber building in Nanaimo, do you know?
Yes, it will, actually.
Yeah.
But I can't resist reminding everyone here that what I've mentioned many times before, 50 years ago, a person I knew said the trouble with Nanaimo was a coal town with a coal town mentality. And the university has played an incredible role in changing that viewpoint. And I just want to remind everyone, and I'm sure you do from time to time, that in the last convocation, your university, our university, graduated students from 91 different countries from around the world. So what that means is, in our little burg of 102,000, if you really worked hard at it, you could communicate with people from 91 different countries here in the confines of the city of Nanaimo, and that's a pretty marvelous thing. So I just want to express the thanks on behalf of Council for the leadership you personally have shown, and in your work on the Mayor's Leaders Table. Wish you well, and your colleagues, as we continue to grow this amazing institution. Thank you.
Thank you again. Thank you, everyone, for your attention. Take care.
And speaking of growth, Mr. Lindsay, the 2022 Development Review.
Thank you, Your Worship. Council, good evening. That's a difficult presentation to follow, but I'll pull a bit on that thread of housing that we were talking about at the end and continue that conversation through what's going to be the next 15 minutes. Ms. Gurry's going to keep an eye on the clock and give me a warning if I get close. So for new council members who have joined us, this is an annual event. We try to come early in the year each year and do a bit of a presentation on kind of what we've seen in terms of growth in the community in the previous year. Normally you would have Mr. Holm here, who's our Director of Development Approvals, or if he was absent, you'd have Ms. Rowett. But unfortunately this evening, they're both unavailable, so you get the third string quarterback. And I'll do my best to work through their presentation, Your Worship. But if there's, I'll try to answer questions, but if there's very specific detail I may not have, I may have to follow up with council, but I'll give it my best shot. So certainly, it's always about the year in review and what is the story for 2022. So, Your Worship, I think there's a few takeaways you'll see in the next few slides. The story is one of strong growth. You saw 2021, Nanaimo was one of the fastest growing places in Canada. Certainly the stats you're going to see today about 2022, that trend is continuing. What you're going to see is a story about major investments in our town centers, including in our downtown. This is much right on the heels of City Plan, which focuses growth in and around our town centers, so that's part of the story. Part of the story is continuing to evolve as a community, and we'll see that a bit through the stats about moving away from being a city that was traditionally identified as single family to more of a mixed housing type across the city, and one that was maybe in the past seen as growing outwards to one today that's growing more inwards in terms of infill and redeveloping existing properties. And the last, I think, part of the story is we have an industry here that's responding to a critical need, which is housing. So lots of significant private investment in the community. So we always start, Your Worship, there's a few key stats that people are always interested in. This one is number of single-family units being constructed in the previous year. So we're 144 last year, and you can see that's down from approximately the 10-year average being 250. And as I mentioned, Nanaimo historically built single-family homes. We're around 60-40 right now in terms of composition of single-family versus multifamily. But I can say, and you'll see again tonight, is the trend is very much moving away from that. I think there's a number of factors that we'll talk about tonight. You know through your land capacity analysis that we did in the OCP that there's a bit of a capacity issue in terms of land for single family, but also there's a housing cost story there and what it costs to be able to enter into new housing. The other part that we often talk about is suites. So this slide is showing the percentage of those new homes that are built in each year, what percentage contain suites. So you all know this story. Back in 2005, the city legalized secondary suites. We've kept track of those stats ever since. It's always kept right in around that 60% number, even going back to 2005. But the last 10 years, the average is right around 60, and last year we were at 65%. The overall unit count, so we talked about single family trending down, but you can see the overall unit count here was just under 1,400 units that were added last year. Just breaking that down a little bit further, so the 10-year average is just over 1,000 units. So last year we saw by far the majority, so it's about 78% were multifamily, just over 1,000, and the remaining being single-family homes or suites. And I'm sure there'll be a question about, well, how can we have more suites than we did single-family homes? And part of the answer to that is, of course, people are still putting suites in existing homes, or they're putting detached suites in their backyards of existing homes. So that makes up the difference. So more suites were added to the community last year than actually single-family dwellings were. We're going to come back to you in the next couple weeks and talk a little bit about what we see in the next 10 years in terms of our housing needs. We're just wrapping up that report right now based on the 2021 census. And we know that over the next 10 years, we have to build about 1,400 units a year to meet the 10-year demand. So 2022, we're almost right on that mark of what we see we need to do on average over the next decade. But more on that in the next couple of weeks. The other number we often talk about, Your Worship, is construction value. So the overall value of all construction in the community was $410 million last year. If that's not clear, it should be $410 million. As you can see, that's the second highest year we've ever had here in the city. And again, a lot of that comes from significant private investment. So the 10-year average, just over 250 million. So 410 million, a very strong year. And they break down, sorry if I can go back a slide. The breakdown there, so as you see, largely residential. The red line, it's somewhat difficult to read on the overhead here, but the second line, that shows the residential, and you get a sense of the scale of residential investment in the community. We always get the question about where are housing units being built. The red dots here represent a single-family home constructed, and the blue represent multifamily, which of course we don't differentiate in the sizes here, but a blue dot could be many, many units, where each of the red dots could be 1 or 2 units if it's a house with a suite. So generally, it's across the entire community, with many of our multifamily projects focused in and around the areas that are town centers in your city plan. And then if we look at 21 to 22, again, that you see generally, I would say, less single family, but overall, again, those numbers are up in 2022, but a good, very, very similar kind of development pattern. Your Worship, just a quick look at some of the significant buildings that were issued in 2022, and we always pull out the top 5 in terms of construction value. And I'll just go through each of them quickly. So the first one on the list at just almost $17 million is a multifamily project, 550 Brecken. So this is under construction right now, and it's right down near the BC Ferry property, just at the end of Stewart, Brecken Hill. And this is a site that's actually been zoned for this use for many, many years, and it's finally been the time now to see that project move forward. So that's an exciting project. Number 4 on the list, a mixed-use project up at Cedar Ridge Place, just over 21 million. Songbird Place, again at the west end of Long Lake, just over 22 million. And at the end of Wills Road, 160-unit seniors project, which is also now under construction. So if you're doing the math quickly here at home, you'll add those 3 up, and you'll see there's about $100 million in construction value just at the west end of Long Lake, just with those 3 projects. So it wasn't many years ago that $100 million in Nanaimo was a good year. And here we are doing $100 million in basically one neighborhood. And that's just a fraction of the development activity that's actually going in around that area. The next, the largest one we had for 2022 was actually this purpose-built rental building, 6020 Lindley Valley Drive. And Your Worship, I mentioned also that this 152-unit building is actually being built by the Molnar Group. And I wouldn't normally mention who was behind these projects, but I think it's worth noting because the Molnar Group was actually one of the first developers out of the gate when we were desperately needing apartment buildings in the community. And they've been a consistent investor of new apartment buildings. Done many projects now in and around Dufferin Crescent, and this is their latest project that they're bringing forward, and it's well underway. I was up by the site on this weekend, and construction's well underway. This slide's looking at other types of applications. So now we're looking at a little bit about development permits, and I think the story here is the development permit application numbers in terms of permit numbers are dropping off, but we're seeing the number of units per permit is going up. So again, it's kind of re-emphasizing that trend of moving away from smaller projects to larger multifamily projects. A lot of information on this slide, but it's really looking at what are we seeing in development permit applications, and is there any trends? And again, the strong trend that jumps out here, you'll hear, is this overall trend for multifamily investment. We think when we look at development permits, we always are interested in these because we want to see what translates now into future years for building permits. So there's a good indication that we're going to see continued strong growth in residential investment. It's not shown on the slide, but I would note 64% of the units that were approved in development permit are targeted to be purpose-built rental. So not only are most of the units being multifamily, the majority of those units are in fact purpose-built rental buildings. In terms of all types of applications, Your Worship, we give Council an update on types of applications we've received and an overall sense of the units in those applications. So you can see there's many units working through the stream right now under development permits that'll be coming forward, many residential units. One interesting one I would note here is the number of rezoning applications is down over previous years. And a lot of that has to do with these applications that you looked at that we've already talked about tonight. Many of those are on land that's been zoned for multifamily use for years, if not decades. So we have a significant amount of pre-zoned land in the community that people are taking advantage of and investing on, and the need for rezoning has not been as significant. A couple of our smaller application types or processes. The one we mentioned, we talked about a little bit, is Board of Variance. So they received 10 applications last year. 9 of those were approved, 1 was denied. Development variance permit applications, those are the generally smaller applications that come before council. They can be things like lot depth or some sort of variance to allow for the subdivision of a property that would otherwise not comply with the bylaw. Or recently council dealt with a development variance permit for retaining walls. So those are some of the examples, but we had 14 of those come forward in 2022. Subdivision applications, Your Worship, and this one we got an asterisk on here because it's really worth talking about. The overall new lots created in 2022 on paper are 23, and you'll see in 2021 there's 218. There's a significant drop there, and much of that has to do with the fact that we had new engineering standards come in. So what happens is there's a year grace period where applications have to be finalized, unless or else the new standards apply. So we always, whenever we have new standards or a change in bylaw, you always see a rush to get those approved. So we had about 150 lots that went through with construction agreements, using that opportunity to secure the improvements rather than complete the physical improvements themselves. So we saw a huge blip at the late days of 2021 that would have otherwise translated to 2022. So it looks like a drop, but I think it's more of, as we go longer, you'll see that is going to smooth out a little bit. And again, I think more interesting to council is kind of what do we see coming down the road, and there's 175 units that are currently under PLA. The new park, we report, so if council is not aware, with all larger subdivisions, we get 5% of the property as park, or we get cash in lieu. But on smaller applications, we do not. And from talking to the approving officer, the majority of the applications we're seeing these days are the smaller infill. So it might be the 2-lot split, the 3-lot split. Many of those are not subject to the park dedication. So we're seeing a reduction. We always report on this every year, Your Worship, new assets. So these are assets that developers or the development community is responsible for constructing as a part of construction. So when they have complete a project, they're responsible for frontage works and services. So that's like the curb gutter, street lighting. So in 2022, for example, we added 5 kilometers of new underground pipes, 48 new street lights. You can read the numbers here. What you'll see, though, I would note is kind of an overall trend in reducing those numbers from previous years. So, of course, if you're doing infill projects or if you're doing a multifamily project, the amount of frontage you have is far less than if you're doing a single-family neighborhood. So this is something we've been witnessing for the last few years as we transition from being a primarily community that delivers single-family to one that's more multifamily. So these numbers are steadily dropping, which I think should be recognized as better achieving your goals of densification and infill. And these are just some additional slides, Your Worship. I'll go through really quickly about other building permits that have been issued, maybe weren't in that top 5, but some very substantial permits that were issued in 2022. And unless there's questions from council, I won't go through each one here. I would mention on this page we have The two on the left, 235 Wallace and 340 Campbell, they're building permits that are ready to issue. Those are both within the downtown. So the TELUS project, which is 235 Wallace, is 195 units, and the Campbell Street is 163 units. So a significant investment in the downtown and bringing more residents into the downtown. I understand the Campbell Street demolition, that's where the Caledonia Clinic is now, is scheduled to start this month. So we'll see some activity on both sites, we expect, in the second quarter of this year. So that's great news, I think, for the downtown. McCleary, sorry, the 388 McCleary, that's also a project, the building permit's been submitted. That's the seniors project of 145 units, also in the downtown core. Other examples of development permits, Your Worship, that have been issued in 2022. So we see those moving forward with building permits. In fact, 41 and 45 Halliburton, that building permit is in fact also ready to be issued, so it'll count under the 2023 stats when we report to you next year. Some larger development permits that we've issued in 22. All of these have proceeded and currently have building permit applications in. So on the top, there's 150, just under 150 dwelling units up behind Michael's in the north end, just as you come into the city. Mixed-use project on Shenton Road, which has 14 units and medical office and commercial. And then there's a 69-unit project on Terminal Avenue. So those are all projects that are in for building permits, and I would expect to see some progress on those this year. Likewise, Your Worship, these are also projects that have now proceeded to building permit. And we have two car dealerships on Kenworth and a 40-unit housing project also in the Kenworth area. So lots of activity in that newer subdivision. These projects were also approved in 22. We have, as of yet, not had building permits submitted, but we're expecting those to come in this calendar year. So additional purpose-built building, 88 units is the largest one, the top left there at McRobb. So more purpose-built and residential expected to come forward. More examples, Your Worship, of DPs that are currently under review by staff. I would note the one in the bottom right. This is at the Beaufort Center, or what is today called the Hospital Commons. So this is a mixed-use project with 12 units and commercial on the ground floor. So exciting investment in and around the hospital, in the hospital neighborhood. Some further examples under review. The one I would note on the bottom left is the Loaves and Fishes. This is on the property that council supported and purchased in 2021 for invested $1.2 million in the property acquisition. And there you can see the concept drawing that's been submitted for a development permit review. And Your Worship, I would just finish with a couple significant rezoning applications, and council's well aware of these, but I mentioned earlier we're not seeing a lot of rezoning, but certainly the ones we have coming in are really substantial rezoning applications. So Sandstone application is continuing, and we expect that to have it in front of you this year. And of course, as you know, the one Terminal Avenue application is currently in process. So, Your Worship, hopefully that was under 15 minutes or close. Uh-oh, I got the little bit over. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lindsay. Close, but not quite a cigar. Any questions from council? Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Through you, if I may, to Mr. Lindsay. Thanks, Mr. Lindsay. Really interesting slides and numbers to share with us, and tells us what I guess we all knew anyway, that we're growing quickly and building is booming. But the one slide that sort of jumped out at me, and you don't need to go back to it, but it was development applications by type, because most of your presentation focused quite naturally on residential construction and types of residences. But in the slide I'm referring to, our city shows until this past year a fairly steady decline, if I'm reading the chart correctly, in commercial construction. And I'm just wondering, as you see our city's population growing, do you foresee a future increased demand or growth in the commercial sector as well to keep up with resourcing our residents? Or perhaps the stats are combined in mixed usage somehow that doesn't really reflect what's happening in the commercial sector. Could you just comment on that?
Your Worship, I would say, first of all, residential has been, and I think is forecasted to be, the significant contributed to our overall construction value. But you're absolutely right. Commercial has trended, I would say, fairly consistently. We do see it going up and down a little bit. Part of that can be one project, of course, could be, you know, a $50 million project and look like it's shooting the stats way up. So you kind of have to dig down a little bit about what's driving it. I would say a lot of what we're seeing, and you're seeing it tonight on your agenda this evening, is a lot of investment in older commercial spaces, kind of, you know, retrofitting, bringing those up to current standards, as much as new commercial. But certainly, I think as we densify these areas, yes, there's going to be a need for more commercial. We're hearing now more, you know, anecdotally, need for more office space in some of these town centers. So things that we haven't seen built in the last maybe decade or two, but you know, certainly I would see it being consistent going forward.
Thank you.
Mr. Lindsay, thank you very much. Much appreciated. Next, committee minutes just for receipt. We have no consent items, Ms. Gurry, and no delegations. And we're on to reports, and the first is Code of Conduct Review. And are you going to introduce it, Ms. Robertson? Just go straight to her?
Exactly, Your Worship. I'm just going to pass it right over to Ms. Robertson, who has worked very hard and long on this code of conduct, and it's back before you. So rather than repeat what she's going to say, I'm just going to turn it right over to her.
Thank
Ms.
you.
Robertson, welcome.
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. So as most of Council is aware, and as discussed at the LGLA, most recently with the Mayor, the province enacted legislation that recently came into effect, making it mandatory for councils within their first 6 months in office to either implement a code of conduct or to review their existing codes of conduct. So just to give a wee bit of background, prior to the legislation coming into effect, staff had been undertaking a review of Council's bylaws and policies, and as one of Council's strategic priorities was a desire to develop a culture of excellence around governance. So when staff was conducting its review, we came across the existing Council policy, but it was foundational in nature and lacked accountability provisions. So in anticipation of the new legislation coming into effect and to meet Council's strategic priority, Council was very supportive of staff bringing forward a new code of conduct for consideration in advance of the legislation coming forward to be ready for the 2022 election, so that newly elected officials would have a clear understanding about conduct rules and expectations prior to the election. And so the council members who are part of the process in 22 will recall that the starting point was with staff meeting with Reese Harding, and he is one of the lawyers who was part of the original working group who conducted research and policy work on the responsible conduct for elected officials on behalf of UBCM. And he was also the province's first appointed ethics commissioner, so his advice and recommendations were invaluable. He was able to point us to some of the better bylaws and policies to review, and then once all the work was conducted and the drafts were done, Reese presented with staff the new Code of Conduct bylaw that included the conduct and accountability provisions, an Ethics Commissioner Establishment bylaw that outlines the role of either a formally appointed Ethics Commissioner or, in absence of it, an ad hoc commissioner, because this would be the individual that would oversee any informal or formal complaints. There was also an oath of office bylaw, a new one that tied the code of conduct to the oath, as well as an amendment to the council spending and amenities policy to include breach provisions. A few minor tweaks were made at the meeting, but I think council overall felt that the bylaws met council's objectives and were supportive. There is more details on this process that's outlined in my May 2022 report that's attached to the agenda. So with the bylaw only recently coming into effect on October 15th, and since its implementation, no informal or formal complaints have been made, and this is really fantastic. And for this good reason, we haven't been able to assess how effective the bylaw might be in a process, and that's okay. So in order to meet the legislative requirements, however, council is required to state whether the bylaw meets the required conduct objectives. And if so, staff would be seeking a motion from council to reaffirm support for the existing Code of Conduct bylaw and confirm that the bylaw does meet your current objectives. Stating so at this time, though, would never preclude council from making amendments to the bylaw at any time in the future if needed. If, however, council wishes to have a more fulsome discussion on the bylaw or any aspect of it, staff could certainly bring it forward to a future meeting for a more detailed review. And that concludes my introduction, unless council has any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Robertson. Much appreciate all the work that's gone into this. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. And a little bit of a rhetorical question, but through you to Ms. Curry, Ms. Robertson. Glad to see this here, but when the heck are we going to get when are we appointing the Ethics Commissioner report to council? Because I've been like bragging about you guys and bragging about this for so long, so I'm wondering when we just get on with it. So happy to reaffirm, and I'll move that motion if you need one, Your Worship. But I am seriously, when do we, the next steps sort of unfold if it's passed tonight?
In terms of the Ethics Commissioner?
Yes.
The bylaw was drafted so that one could go either with a formal appointment by council for a formal commissioner, but in the absence of that, we would always default to a third-party commissioner, or that would be appointed by the CAO should the need arise. So council can continue to just go along, and should something arise, we would look to hire a third party. But if council wanted to pursue the more formal route, I would recommend that staff come back with a report that could outline the costs and probably a proposed recruitment process or a selection criteria for council's consideration.
Okay, thank you. Because my understanding from the presentation when this was adopted was that there would be sort of an ad hoc process until that report came back for council's consideration. So I've been waiting for that to come back. So I was just curious. Is formal direction needed to bring that back?
Yeah, staff would seek formal direction if you wanted us to bring back that report to outline it to council.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I hope we're not anticipating any problems.
No, but
But just to clarify, Your Worship, so, and to Councillor Brown, so right now, we do have the Ethics Commissioner bylaw that has been adopted by council. And in the bylaw, it allows for the formal appointment, as Councillor Brown's alluding to, of an Ethics Commissioner. And in the absence of council doing that, which would, as Ms. Robertson said, require some prompting, direction, and we could come back with a report, then we would deal with it on an ad hoc basis, which is if and when an issue arises that triggers the Code of Conduct bylaw and that investigation process, we would do an ad hoc until or unless there was an official appointment of an Ethics Commissioner.
The process would be the same for either individual, whether formal or not formal. I think when we presented it to council initially, the benefits to having a formal position more relate to the fact that there would be a relationship that you could develop with that individual, and they would probably be the ones that would conduct the training, conflict of information session, things like that. So it's more about whether you want to have a formal relationship or just bring someone in as needed.
I'm going to I'll let Councillor Thorpe, given the technology tonight, I'm terrified of. We'll let Councillor Thorpe go, and then we'll come back to you, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, my question actually was very similar to Councillor Brown's because I was curious about the appointment of the Ethics Commissioner, and the way I read the report was that without having somebody in place, it would be an ad hoc appointment made either by the mayor or the CAO. Is that correct?
It'd be by the CAO in that case.
By the CAO, thank you. So this is an area that has always been of great interest to me, Ms. Robertson. Thank you very much for your work on it. I think it's important for our viewers to understand that the difference now is that although we did have some type of code of conduct before, now it is embedded in city bylaw. And it's a bylaw that applies to council. And like any bylaw, it is triggered by complaint. It is therefore investigated, and there are penalties involved. And those penalties also are embedded in the bylaw. So I think it's a big step forward. I think it's a great movement towards greater accountability of behavior on council. Not that this council, touch wood, has needed it, but it needs to be in place. So again, thanks for your work on this, and I suppose whether or not we wish to appoint a permanent ethics commissioner is a future point of discussion for council.
That's correct. Tonight, right now, I'm looking for council to confirm whether it supports the Code of Conduct bylaw and confirm that the bylaw meets council's current conduct objectives. If not, to bring it back for further discussion.
Thank you. I think the challenge with codes of conduct in the past has always been when it comes to the point of accountability and penalties and how do you enforce that. By having this in the bylaw, it's there, it's law. Ms. Gurry, I see, has her hand up. Maybe I've said something incorrect.
No, you're absolutely correct, Councillor Thorpe, and I just wanted to even add to that and to what you said, in that it's embedded in your oath of office, and that is a bylaw now as well. So when you do your oath of office and you're sworn into office as a member of this council, you're tying yourself to the code of conduct, which then there's nothing to sign and be accountable. Your own self, you're accountable when you do your oath of office. So that was a huge bonus to this, the way this was done and this process was completed.
I think we're a leader in this area, so thank you again.
Thank you, and back to Councillor Brown and then Councillor Gesselbach.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm kind of trying to seek staff's advice here on the appropriate place to actually ask for a report. Is that a follow-up motion after tonight? And the reason I ask is because I actually view that Ethics Commissioner as sort of a crucial component of this, because the appointment of an officer is a 2/3 dismissal vote as opposed to just a 5-4 majority vote of council, which I think is a pretty important piece and an innovative piece on this. And the second thing is, structurally, I know in the past, and I won't go into further details, but I think people can connect the dots where there has been clear issues between relationships between a CAO and a councillor, and that is problematic. And so for those two reasons, I really view this Ethics Commissioner as an appointee as a crucial element. So I'm just wondering, Your Worship and staff, I could bring a notice of motion getting that report, but I'm just wondering, is tonight, or is there an upcoming place where it's the appropriate place to seek that information?
I think council can.
Ms. Gurry.
So, Your Worship, the recommendation for the Code of Conduct, if we could deal with that first, then subsequently, I think a motion asking for staff to bring forward a report on proceeding with the appointment of an Ethics Commissioner and that bylaw. Information to do with that and council decision-making points, options for council's decision could come. Ms. Robertson, no?
I was just going to say that maybe after the first motion is made, if the subsequent one would be something on the lines of for staff to come back with a more detailed report on costs and a proposed recruitment process and selection criteria for council's consideration.
That sounds good, yeah.
Councillor Gesselbach, and then we'll get to the motion.
I can save my questions for the second motion that could potentially be coming.
Thank you very much. Would someone care to move the recommended motion? So moved. Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Armstrong. Any discussion? I suspect not. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Now, Ms. Robertson, Councillor Brown, you're going to...
I would like to move the wonderfully articulated motion for further information that Ms. Robertson said a moment ago.
And we have a seconder in Councillor Hemmons. Councillor Gesselbach, do you have a question now, or?
Thanks, yeah, no, I'd be...
Could you? Yeah, there, you're on now. Sorry.
I'd be interested in the report. I can see sort of the benefit of having an appointed ethics commissioner to kind of lock in the good behavior and avoid the rare chance of history repeating itself. My question is, I know there's been other municipalities that have, like, councillors that have reached out to me asking about our particular code of conduct and structure. Are there other municipalities that are you aware of that are looking at potentially having an ethics commissioner, and is that something that could be shared in between municipalities, that role, if, you know, just for the amount of work that potentially would be available, and is that something that could be part of the report?
The only two commissioners that have been appointed so far have been the City of Surrey and also the City of Vancouver. And they have they have very different approaches as well in how those commissioners work. The one in Surrey, everything to date has been behind closed doors. City of Vancouver is very transparent. Their bylaw is very much about an open process. They are the only two so far, and Mr. Harding had referred us to Vancouver's model, although Surrey also has some really good criteria that can be used, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel, and I can bring that information forward in a more detailed report in the near future.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. Since Mr. Harding is no longer the Ethics Commissioner for Surrey, is there an opportunity to talk to him to see the pros and cons of that approach?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is the Advisory Committee on Accessibility and Inclusiveness. Ms. Gurry, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is coming back before you based on discussions that we had at the Governance and Priorities Committee meeting on February 13th, where we brought forward a draft for the Advisory Committee on Accessibility and Inclusiveness, and there was discussion had by council as well as a poll done, and this is based on that discussion, information that we heard and information that we brought forward to you on that day. And this is to have you confirm and approve the terms of reference that are before you and attached to this report. And then we will come forward, we will go out for advertising based again on the discussions that we had and the criteria that you had come to agree upon at the February 13th meeting. And then we'll have council appointments made and this committee can proceed.
Thank you very much. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. I just want to know, what would the quorum numbers be for 13-person committee?
Quorum is 50% plus one. So if there's 7 members, quorum would be 4. If it's 8, then it's 5. If it's 9, then it's 5.
Yeah, but for this one, it would be 7, correct? The only reason I bring that up is we quite often struggled for quorum, so that's why I wonder if 13 is too many. Thank you.
Anyone care to make the recommended motion? Councillor Brown, seconded Councillor Armstrong. Any discussion? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. And finally, development permit application number DP 1269-1840 Stewart Avenue. Mr. Lindsay, please.
Thank you, Worship. After a large agenda on your meeting last week, we just have the one development application this evening. As you mentioned, it's a development permit at 1840 Stewart Avenue. It's otherwise known as the Sealand Market. You have the air photo on the overhead, but maybe I can ask if attachment F could be brought up, which is the building renderings, and give people a sense of what is being proposed. Thank you. So this is primarily an upgrade to the existing Sealand Market. As you know, for those who have been in the community for a long time, the Sealand is a water lease. It's actually not a fee simple property. The development has not substantially changed down there in many decades, and so the city is very happy to see there's being investment into those buildings. So this development permit is to allow for the exterior upgrades, but there's also, I should note, a small variance. There's some canopies that are being added on the second floor. A good portion of the building, Your Worship, or not a good portion, a portion of the building is actually in the 15-meter setback from the ocean, so any work in that area requires a variance. So the 2 canopies themselves will be 5.7 meters from the natural boundary, which is a variance of 9.3 meters, but within the existing building envelope, and staff are supportive of the variance. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lindsay. I'm not seeing any questions. Moved by Councillor Hemmond, seconded by Councillor Armstrong. Any discussion? None. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Next is bylaws, officer designation and delegation of authority bylaw 2023, number 7353.01. Councillor Armstrong, please.
Thank you. A motion that officer designation and delegation of authority bylaw 2023, number 7353.01, housekeeping amendments be adopted.
Seconded Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. We have no notices of motion. Other business, Councillor Manley, motion re-addiction and mental health crisis. Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the motion reads, the current policies on mental health and addiction and the lack of proper funding to address these issues are impacting communities and municipal governments at an unacceptable level. And therefore, the City of Nanaimo requests that the Government of Canada engage in immediate process of justice reform to create a comprehensive alternative system like the Portugal model, where people with addiction and mental health challenges who break laws are steered through a court system with fully funded and functional treatment facilities, rehabilitation, and community service programs. The provincial government immediately fund the detox and treatment beds needed to assist people with addiction and mental health challenges, and the federal and provincial governments provide the investment needed to address the homelessness crisis, which in turn has been feeding the mental health and addiction crisis. And
You're
process is
moving it.
done.
If you're moving it, Councillor Armstrong is seconding it. Go ahead, speak to it, please.
So we're all feeling this frustration, you know, with what's happening on our streets. We're seeing, you know, we've had 100 years of prohibition in this country, and we're seeing this process of decriminalization, but we're not seeing a process for a safe supply or a legal supply. So we still have the drug supply regulated by organized crime, and we see that people have to in survival mode, have to find ways to procure drugs. I'm not, you know, I'm not opposed to people that use drugs if they're not impacting the community or impacting others. You know, we have people that choose to eat things that are bad for their health, all kinds of junk food. We have legal alcohol, we have legal tobacco, we have legal cannabis. People are able to alter their bodies in the way they see fit. But when it comes to impacting the community, we need to be able to take action. And it feels like at this stage, we're not able to. There are some comprehensive studies available that show that you know, one out of SFU that shows that, you know, with 15 years of research, that using the existing costs to deal with these issues, they could effectively reduce crime by 70% and reduce medical emergencies by 50% by providing housing and that's tied to treatment and working with people in a way that scatters people throughout communities rather than concentrating services heavily. We're at the end of hopefully at the end of a long experiment with neoliberal policies around housing, where the government has bailed out on funding social infrastructure, the social housing that we need in this country. And, you know, it's not just Nanaimo, it's communities right across this country where people with diverse abilities, with disabilities, people on fixed incomes, seniors, single parent families, students, low-wage workers are all struggling with the increased cost of housing, and the market has decided. You know, we've left it up to the free market, and the market has decided that if you can't afford what the market can bear, then you can go live on the streets. And it's unacceptable. It's unacceptable in a country as wealthy as Canada. And when we have people who are vulnerable on our streets, they are vulnerable to the predators who prey on people on our streets. And when you have people that are open to suggestion, that want to be connected to community, and the only people connecting to them are people who are street entrenched or involved in the drug trade, then we're actually exacerbating the issues rather than dealing with them concrete. So we're seeing a growing street population, seeing a growing unhoused population, and the issues around addiction and mental health, and the combination of those things is having a huge impact. You know, a low income family can't get counseling for their children. We've just gone through a COVID crisis where people are really affected, their mental health is affected, but people can't get basic counseling services. Why isn't that part of our Canada Health Act? It's impacting people negatively, and it's exacerbating the situation as well. So I'm fed up. I know the rest of the council is fed up. This is not in our bailiwick. It's not something that people paying property tax should be paying for. And it's time for the provincial governments and the federal government to step up properly with a plan to deal with this crisis that all communities across Canada are facing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Manley. I am not seeing any speakers because I doubt very much anyone's opposing this motion. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Question period. I suspect we don't have anything. That's correct. A motion for adjournment, please. Moved Councillor Brown, seconded Councillor Hemmons. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate tonight.